All right. Hi, good morning. Well, it's morning for me at least. I don't know about you guys. So here, notes and little review for 0-2. That's Unit 0, our review, and Lesson 2 on order of operations. So order of operations, you might think or you might be remembering PEMDAS. That's a very, very, very similar thing to GEMS. GEMS is just a little bit better than PEMDAS, and I will explain to you why in a little bit. So GEMS, starting with the G first. The G is also very, very similar to what the P stands for in PEMDAS. The G stands for groupings. So groupings. And the reason I use G for groupings instead of P for parentheses is because groupings can be considered more than just parentheses. There's more than just parentheses that you can use to group numbers together. Like, for example, you can use parentheses, obviously, but you could also use brackets. Brackets can be used to group numbers together, as well as these fancy little bars, which you may or may not remember, are called absolute value bars. We're going to talk more about those in our first unit when we get there. So first thing that you start with when you're looking at numbers and we're looking at like string of numbers is anything that's grouped together, rather it's parentheses, brackets, or absolute value bars. Our next acronym, or our next letter in our acronym, is that E, and that's the same thing that the E stands for in PEMDAS, and that would be exponents. So anything that is, being raised to an exponent, if I've got 5 being raised to the second power, that needs to be done after you do any groupings, or, if you've got 4 being raised to the third power. After your exponents is your M, which is very similar to what PEMDAS has the M and the D for, but that's what can get kind of confusing, because in the PEMDAS, the M is clearly before the D, which would imply that multiplication always comes before division, and that is not the case. Multiplication is not always going to come before division. It's whichever comes first in order from left to right. So this M here in GEMS doesn't just stand for multiplication. It stands for multiplication, keyword here, or division. And when you're looking at that, it's whichever comes first in order from left to right. And you might be wondering why from left to right? Well, that's because that's the way we read. We read from left to right, not like the Chinese who read from right to left. So it's not always multiplication. It could be division depending on which one shows up in order first. And just like the S here is standing for subtraction. Let's go back to purple. Or addition. And they emphasize that here by using the S for GEMS instead of the A for addition here. ADDITION, subtraction or addition. And just like this multiplication one, and that's why I kind of wrote that big enough to go across both of them, this is both whichever comes first in order from left to right. So subtraction always isn't going to come first. Addition always isn't going to come first. It's whichever shows up when you're going in order from left to right. So there is what that acronym stands for. Now let's take a look at our 2 examples for today. So you might take a look at these 2 examples, and at first glance you might think that these 2 examples are exactly the same and should result in the same answer. Well, let's try that and let's follow the order of operations. So looking at example 1 here first, what would be the first thing I need to start with? Keeping in mind, I've got that GEMS in the back of my head. G stands for groupings. Do I have any groupings here? And I do. I have this 3 plus 1 in these parentheses here that I need to look at. So when I add 3 plus 1, that gives me 4. Now, mind you, and this is how you're going to show me your work, you want to carry down everything else that you didn't do anything to. So 5 squared plus 2. Now, I can't just leave that 2 next to the 4 because it's not a 24. So what operation is going on between the 2 and the 4 here? What operation does parentheses represent? When we're looking at parentheses and there's a number next to it, that means multiplication. So let's make a little note of that real quick. That right here, and I wanted that to be smaller, this is multiplication. So, okay, I did my groupings. Now you might be thinking that I still have groupings left because I have my 4 in parentheses. But is there anything to do inside of that parentheses? And the answer to that is no. There's only that 4 piece there, so that 4, there's nothing to do with it. So next, moving on, we are going to move on to E. What the E stood for exponents. Do we have any exponents here? Yes, we do. 5 squared, 5 times 5, that's what 5 squared means. Remember those exponents means 5 times 5 is just 25. And again, just carrying everything else down from that previous step that I didn't touch yet, just keeping that order nice. So next, we're looking for multiplication or division. Remember that M is not just multiplication, it's multiplication or division. And I do have a little bit of multiplication I can do right here with the 4 times the 2. 4 times 2 gives me 8. Carry everything else down. So now last but not least, 25 plus 8. Let's see, 5, which would be 33. So for our first example, we got 33. Let's see if we'll end up with the same answer for example 2, which looks almost identical to example 1. So the first question I'd be asking you when you're looking at this would be, what do you notice that's different about these? What makes example 1 different from example 2? You can see example 1 has parentheses here, which I'm going to highlight in pink, whereas example 2 does not have any parentheses. So if I'm looking at my acronym for GEMS, starting with G for groupings, there's nothing grouped together here, so there's nothing for me to do there. E, exponents. I do have that exponent of 5 squared, or 5 times 5. So 25, and again, carrying everything else down as is. So M, multiplication or division. And I do have a little bit of multiplication to do right here, that 2 times 3. Carry my 25 plus 2 times 3 is 6. Carry down that plus 1. 25, so I'm done with multiplication and division because there was nothing else to do. And S, subtraction or addition. And remember, this is not just subtraction or addition, it's both. So 25 plus the 6 gives me 31, plus 1 gives me 32. So close answers, right? They're within, 1 point of each other or 1 number of each other, but not the same and not the same process to get there. So very, very important that when you're doing your practice problems and your homework problems that you are following those order of operations. Use your notes. And as always, email me if you have any questions or any